In this video, I'm going to update my top 10 list of players under the age of 30 that I think have the best Hall of Fame path. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me back on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. In what has become an annual update of sorts for my top 10 list, I'm going to share it with you once again, my thinking for all the players under the age of 30. These guys are the furthest from the Hall of Fame. So there's a lot of guesswork here, a lot of extrapolation of their stats, assuming that they're going to play for a long time at a productive level. So I expect there to be a lot of changes as time goes on. This just gives me an idea of sorts of who's really going to be there in the long run, who has the best chance of being there in the long run. And it's to help me if I want to buy and collect cards of future Hall of Famers. It helps me to be able to really focus my collecting on guys who have the best chance in the long run. Now, to be clear, I cut off my age limit based on what age they were in the 2024 baseball season for the most part. If guys turn 30 after the midpoint through the season, I still count them on this list, just to make things easier for me. Now, the 2024 list, I had to blow up in a lot of ways and kind of restart. And that's because there have been a lot of guys graduating from that 29 age to 30 in the last 2 years. Let's start by looking back a couple years ago. 2 years ago, here was my list. Mookie Betts, Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, Jose Ramirez, Xander Bogaerts, all guys at 29 years old that graduated to the over 30 list. And some pretty great generational type players there too. And you'll note as well, there's a lot of guys that are 28 years old on this list. So if you look at the 2023 list, you'll see that a lot of those guys again graduated last year. Lindor, Seager, Turner, Bregman, Matt Olson even snuck onto the end of the list. These guys have all graduated as well to the over 30 list, and it doesn't leave me a whole lot going on here. There's obviously Shohei at the top. He really rocketed his way up with the kinds of seasons he's had, especially when he was pitching and hitting. And then you got the Acuñas and the Sotos and the Tatis, really great, really young players, and that is a key for the Hall of Fame. The earlier that you start your career, you have a by far better chance of getting into the Hall of Fame eventually. If you start at the age of 25 or after, even if you have a phenomenal career, it's really hard to get in. And then last year too, we'll look at the honorable mentions list. These are the guys that I had to choose from to hopefully fill up my list this year. And you'll notice that there's some good players that had good seasons, but there's a lot of good players that had pretty bad or injury-riddled seasons in 2024. So it wasn't as clear-cut to be able to make up my list. Yordan Alvarez had a pretty great season. Bo Bichette had a horrible one. Kyle Tucker dealt with injuries, so did Austin Riley. He wasn't that great when he was on the field. Bellinger had a decent year, but he's getting pretty old for this list. Rafael Devers had a pretty good year. Albies was out for half the year with injuries, if not more, and Alcantara didn't even pitch at all. So what does all that mean for my top 10 list after the 2024 season? Well, let's start at the top. Easy pick. Everybody knows who it's going to be. Shohei Ohtani. He's 30 by now, but he was 29 for the majority of the 2024 season. Don't really need to talk a whole lot about him. 225 home runs, a 142 ERA plus, and a 155 OPS plus. An incredible pitcher and hitter compared to his peers. WAA of 29, WAR of 44, and he did get a late start to his career. This is exactly the type of player that even if he starts at the age 25, 26, he is going to be able to make the Hall of Fame because of how exceptional he has been, especially if he keeps it up for at least a couple more years. And 2024 was no sign of slowing down after being the first player in history to get 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases. Projections, it's really impossible with this guy. He's perennially a top 5 hitter and a top 5 pitcher. What can you do with that kind of guy? He's destined for the Hall of Fame. Accolades, there's tons. 4 All-Stars, a Rookie of the Year, 3 MVP awards, and 1 more top 5 MVP finish, and a top 5 Cy Young Award finish. 3 Silver Sluggers as well. Just an incredible career already for this guy, and he's just turning 30. The next guy up on my list, and like I said, the pickings here were slim, so I had to start dipping into the younger guys already. And so I went with Juan Soto. He is 25 years old for the most part in 2024. He'll be 26 next year. 934 hits, 201 home runs, a 160 OPS plus. After the year that he had with the Yankees, his WAA and WAR numbers skyrocketed again and actually surpassed some of those other guys that are 28, 29, 30 years old that were on the list in previous years. He had a phenomenal year for the Yankees. Mets fans, be excited. I'm sure that they overpaid him, but if you're Steve Cohen and the Mets, who cares? You're going to have this guy on the team for at least 5 more seasons, if not 15. So enjoy it, Mets fans, while you have Lindor and Soto probably batting 1 and 2 in the lineup. Projections for him, sky is the limit. He walks a ton, so he may not get to 3,000 hits, but he started so young that I wouldn't put it past him either. 500 home runs, I think that's an easy yes for him as well. 4-time All-Star, 3-time top 5 MVP, 5 Silver Sluggers, and a World Championship. And for Mets fans, hopefully a lot more coming too, right? Now, the third guy on the list, a lot of people are not going to love him, but he has a great path for the Hall of Fame still, and that is Carlos Correa. 2024 was his age 29 season. 1,150 hits already, 187 home runs, a 126 OPS plus. All pretty decent numbers, but this is an example of a guy that started really young and just keeps producing at least at an above average, if not good level. And sometimes those guys are the ones that sneak up on you for the Hall of Fame. His WAA is 28.5, his WAR is 44.5, numbers that are actually not far off from Ohtani and better than Soto, but he is 29 years old, so 4 more years on top of Soto. He could easily get to 60-plus WAR. He just needs to stay on the field. And that was one of the big questions after his failed contracts with the Giants and the Mets, if you remember that as well. Imagine a Soto, Correa, Lindor team with the Mets. That would be crazy. But there were a lot of long-term questions about the health of his body. And 2024 showed that he had some injury issues once again. So it really is all up to staying on the field for Correa if he's going to get there. He's a 3-time All-Star, he's the Rookie of the Year, a top 5 MVP finish. He did win a Gold Glove and a Platinum Glove, and he has a World Championship as well. I know a lot of people are down on Correa. He's not all that collectible because of his history with the Astros, and he just doesn't seem to be all that likable. But to me, he has one of the best paths still for the under 30 players. Next up after Correa, I put Ronald Acuna Jr. He was 26 years old in 2024. He barely played this season, and when he did play, he was actually playing pretty poorly. But he once again missed at least 5 months of the season with another torn ACL injury in his other knee now. That's 2 ACL tears on 2 different knees in the past 2 years, let's say. He had 1 good season between the 2. But when he's on the field, he is absolutely electric. 815 hits, 165 home runs, 139 OPS plus, 196 stolen bases. Numbers that are falling behind of Soto now because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. But like I said, when he's on there, he is amazing. 16 WAA, 26 WAR, numbers again that are falling behind. If you can't stay on the field, you're not going to collect those. If he can be healthy, the sky's the limit for this guy as well. With his combination of hit tool, power tool, and speed tool, he's a phenomenal player. I hope he stays on the field just so we can be able to continue watching him play. 4-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, 1 MVP award last year, and another top 5 MVP finish, and 3 Silver Slugger awards. Getting Acuna at 26, my 4th spot on the list. And rounding out the top 5 is Fernando Tatis Jr., 25 years old this past season, and his stats are behind because as well, he's dealt with injuries and that PED suspension from, was it 2 years ago now, right? 561 hits, 127 home runs, 140 OPS plus. His counting stats are low because of that, but he got such a young start in his career that it almost doesn't matter. It just depends on how much he can stay on the field going forward. Again, like Acuna, he's a guy that when he's on the field, he's been phenomenal, flashing all sorts of tools. 14.5 WAA, 22 WAR. But one of my big questions is, will he return to this elite status? Both in 2023 and 2024, he was a good, if not almost great player, but he wasn't great or elite in any stretch of the mind, except for on defense in 2023. But that's the big question. Will he return back to form, or was the Tatis that we saw before that lost year to PEDs an old Tatis that we're not going to see again? Really going to have to watch this one and see how it unfolds. He could be a great player, or he could be a Hall of Fame type player. We just don't know yet, I don't think. A lot of accolades for such a young player. 2 All-Stars, 2 top 5 MVP finishes, 2 Silver Sluggers, a Gold Glove, and that Platinum Glove as well last year. All right, now we're dipping into that honorable mentions list from before, trying to figure out the back half of my top 10 and what it's going to look like. The first guy that I put at number 6, though, didn't even make my honorable mentions list last year because he had such a poor season in 2023. But he came back strong in 2024, and that is Vlad Guerrero Jr. He played the 2024 season mostly at the age of 25, 905 hits, 160 home runs, 137 OPS plus, 10 WAA, and 21.5 WAR. Now, his counting stats are actually better than Tatis and Acuna at about the same age. But I put him down further on the list for 2 reasons. He hasn't had injury issues. So when he has been on the field, it's been a little bit of great and a little bit of meh. So you don't really know long-term what you're going to get with Vlad. And with his body type, I get concerned about the longevity. He could end up being like a Prince Fielder type that's great through his age 30 season, but then a very drastic downhill after that. I think athletes like Acuna and Tatis will likely hold up better over time than Guerrero, but he really is a phenomenal hitter, and he's done a lot of work recently too on his body and his defense to try to make him an overall better player. We'll just have to see how he ages over time. He is a 4-time All-Star at such a young age, a top 5 MVP finish once, a Gold Glove, and 2 Silver Sluggers. So I like him a lot. I just didn't like him enough for those reasons to put him higher on the list. And a similar guy at number 7 is Yordan Alvarez. He's 27 years old, so 2 years older than Vlad, and his counting stats are a little bit lower, if not about on par with Vlad. So obviously he has fewer years to make up ground. He has a 166 OPS plus, though, compared to Vlad's 137, showing that Yordan is more consistently the greater hitter. Whereas Vlad has had those slumps, Yordan really hasn't had slumps, at least with the bat. WAA of 15 and a WAR of 23.5. But the question for me on him is, how will he age over time? He doesn't have great knees, and the Astros have been running him into the outfield, at least on occasion throughout the last few seasons. I do think he is a long-term DH guy, and they just need to upgrade their outfield defense a little bit. But how will he age over time, even at the DH? Will he be able to stay on the field so he can keep hitting? His accolades: 3-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year in 2019, 1 top 5 MVP finish, and a Silver Slugger award as well. Great hitter, just has some deficiencies in his game, and we'll have to see how he develops over time. All right, the number 8 guy on my list was just traded to the Chicago Cubs, and that's Kyle Tucker. He was 27 as well for the majority of 2024, and his counting stats are a little bit lower than Alvarez. 615 hits, 125 home runs, 139 OPS plus. Not quite the same caliber of hitter, but he's actually pretty good out there in the outfield. So he adds a lot more value overall around his game than guys like Yordan or Vlad do. 14.5 WAA, 23 WAR. His projections, I think it's really tough to say with him. He started a little bit later. He wasn't an early 20s player. And so it's hard to know exactly how he's going to hold up and where he's going to get to over time. He is a 3-time All-Star, 1 top 5 MVP finish, a Gold Glove, and a Silver Slugger award. I think Tucker is very interesting. He could be a great player for the next several years and really zoom up the list. Or if he has trouble staying on the field, he could kind of fade. And the Cubs are an interesting place. If I were the Cubs and I just traded for him, I'd like to try to lock him up long term if I can. But I'm also a little bit hesitant to lock him up long term until I can see what he's going to do in 2025. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of walk that line with him. It would be exciting to see him in a Cubs uniform for a number of years to come, though. The number 9 guy on my list is coming completely out of left field. He wasn't even on my honorable mentions last year, and that is Emmanuel Clase. He's been called by one of his catchers as the greatest pitcher in baseball, comparing him to anybody. And his stats are pretty supportive of that in a lot of ways. 158 saves, a .89 career whip, a 251 ERA plus, all of that by the age of 26. That's pretty phenomenal. The WAA and the WAR numbers are really low, but that's different for relief pitchers. You really can't compare directly. But they're still not that bad either. You compare them to guys like Trevor Hoffman, Billy Wagner, and even other guys that have gotten in more recently, like Lee Smith, Goose Gossage, and you'll see that his numbers are pretty on track with a lot of those guys. If he can get to 25-30 WAR, that's usually pretty good for a relief pitcher. But the key here is 500 saves. He's on a great track already. We'll see how long the Guardians hold on to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded in the coming years as he gets closer to free agency, and we'll see where he goes, but he has been phenomenal, almost unhittable, as long as you ignore the 2024 postseason. He has 3 All-Stars, a top 5 Cy Young Award, and he was a 2-time Mariano Rivera Award winner for the best relief pitcher in the league. Relievers are often the most up and down, so you don't know until his career gets going, but I think he's a pretty good bet the way he's looking right now. And to round out my top 10 is a guy that I can't ignore, but I'm just not a huge fan of either, and that is Rafael Devers. He keeps on having good seasons, like pretty solid seasons, but he's just never gotten to that great level in my mind, and he doesn't play good enough defense to make up for that either. He's 27 years old now. He does have over 1,000 hits, 200 home runs on the dot, a 126 OPS plus, which, like I said, is a good number, but as he ages, that number will creep downward as well. And so he really has to have some great seasons out of the next 3 or 4 to be able to move up farther on this list. His WAA is only 8.5, and that is a key one for me. I like WAA better than WAR because it's wins above the average player in the league. And that shows that even though he's pretty good above replacement player, he just doesn't excel that much against the average player in the league. And that doesn't surprise me that he's 27 and he's behind everybody else in this list in that category. He's a good, solid player, but just not an elite player. Projections, we'll have to see. I think he's going to be a first baseman, if not a DH, in the next number of seasons. It'll be interesting to see if the Red Sox actually sign somebody to play third base or not in this offseason. He is a 3-time All-Star, a 2-time Silver Slugger, and again, those are indicative of a good player, but he doesn't have any of those accolades that show he's ever been really elite. And that's why he's number 10 on my list. Sorry, Red Sox fans. If I were you, I would have paid for somebody else than Devers for a long-term contract. So there's my top 10 list. Quick honorable mentions. Let's look back at the list that I made last year and who I added to the bottom of this one. Bo Bichette, Austin Riley, Cody Bellinger, Ozzie Albies, and Sandy Alcantara. They all got a year older without being a year greater, really. There's only 2 guys on this list that I'm still kind of excited about. That's Austin Riley. I think that he dealt with an injury last year, but his trajectory was showing that he would become an elite player. And we'll have to see how he bounces back in 2025 if 2024 can be dismissed as injury. As he gets into his prime years, he really needs to produce to be able to make this list. And the other one is Alcantara. Pitchers are totally different. And you'll notice I don't have any pitchers on my top 10 except Shohei. I would love to be able to put a pitcher in the top 10, but they're just so unknown until they get later in their careers. Are they going to have injuries? Are they going to be able to be productive? Are they going to keep pitching at a high level? And it's just hit and miss. We are way out of the era of when pitchers would just keep on producing year after year. And now it's a huge question mark every single season. Alcantara could be able to come back, have some great seasons in his late 20s, early 30s, and get back on the radar. Or we may never really hear from him again as an all-star level pitcher. We're going to have to wait it out and see. And then the last 3 guys on the list are just a little bit young still to be able to make it in the top 10, but I would not be surprised if any of these 3 guys jump into the top 10 with another great season in 2025. That's Bobby Witt, J-Rod, and Gunnar Henderson. I'm personally most excited about Bobby Witt Jr. What a phenomenal season he had in 2024. Really stepped up his game. I'd love to be able to see where he goes from here. J-Rod was the opposite. He actually started really strong and he's cooled off the last season or 2. So we'll have to see how he does getting into his 24-year season. But he started really young as well. And so even if he never is an elite player, he could be one of those guys that compiles a lot of stats over time. And then Gunnar, really, it was his 2nd season in 2024. Phenomenal season. Like Witt, he's 1 season behind, I think. But we'll see where he goes in the future. So that is my top 10 list for players under the age of 30 that I think have the best path for the Hall of Fame. Comment down below if you agree or disagree. Talk to me about where you'd put these players, or if you think I missed out on somebody that should be on the list. This is going to be my last video before the holidays, so happy holidays to everybody out there. Thanks for watching, and join me in 2025. I'm going to be putting out my top 10 pickups of the 2024 calendar year in terms of my baseball card collection. And then in early January, I'll be talking about the Hall of Fame balloting with the writer's ballot. Until then, keep talking baseball, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you around.